Hello pals and welcome back to a new video. Today I thought we'd just have like a really informal chat about some summer reading favourites. I've just finished a fantastic work of non-fiction about some journaling favourites, some poetry that I'm reading at the moment, and a TV documentary series that I'm currently watching from the 60s, which I'm loving. There's currently a heat wave right now in England, so I just have a glass of ice water. Let's go ahead and just make a start. Last night I finished this book, Jane Austen and George Eliot, The Lady and the Radical by Edward Whitley. This book asks, what do we gain by examining Jane Austen and George Eliot together? What are the parallels? What are the differences? They are the UK's or England's most famous female novelists, and yet they couldn't be more different in terms of form, in subject, in ideas, in temperament. I adore the novels of both of these women. I talk about them all of the time. And in terms of what you gain by like examining, analysing them together, I think you gain an awful lot. I thought that this was really brilliantly done. This is separated into chapters on, for example, love and marriage, fortunes and finance. My favourite one was on gentlemen and trade. This goes into quite a lot of detail how Jane Austen and George Eliot are linked by the thread of George Eliot's partner, George Henry Lewis, who was a journalist and a literary critic in the 19th century. He was one of the first people to champion, at that point, a largely kind of forgotten Jane Austen and really champion her as being one of the best English novelists. And I have to say that I really love him as a character. I would love to track down some of his works of criticism and one of his novels to read. There is a third figure in this, and that is the figure of Charlotte Bronte, who acts as the link between Jane Austen and George Eliot. When Charlotte Bronte was writing under the pseudonym of Cura Bell, her and George Henry Lewis, they were corresponding with each other. He recommended to her that she read Jane Austen, which I think he did for everyone, but he had correctly guessed that she was a woman. He recommended that she read Jane Austen. They kind of corresponded at length. As you can imagine, the author of Jane Eyre, living in Haworth Parsonage, used to the Yorkshire Moors, didn't get along very well with Jane Austen. And as much as I love Jane Austen, that does not surprise me at all. I already knew that Charlotte Bronte was not a fan of Austen's work when she read them. I didn't realise that that was prompted by George Lewis, so that was fascinating. I have Charlotte Bronte's kind of response to reading some works of Jane Austen, and she describes them as carefully fenced, highly cultivated, a garden with neat borders and delicate flowers, but with no open country, no fresh air, and no Bonnie Beck. That is exactly what I would imagine Charlotte Bronte would think of Jane Austen. It's so on the nose for her, but Charlotte Bronte comes out of this so well, and it really made me want to go back and read Ballad and the Professor. So that's one of the things that I also took from this. His understanding of Regency England to the Victorian period is bang on the money in this, in terms of the history, the literary culture. This is so insightful, really knowledgeable, and his kind of passion for all of the novels from both authors really shines through in this. One of the best biographies I've read all year. Because I finished that last night, the next book that I'm going to is The Ballad of Dorothy Wordsworth by Frances Wilson, which I'm really excited to get to. I hold this in one of my spring book hauls. I'm now kind of starting to work my way through those as I start on my summer reading as well. I went to Rydal Mount at the beginning of spring, and Rydal Mount is the house that William Wordsworth and Dorothy Wordsworth end up in as his literary career takes off and they kind of increase their wealth. They end up in Rydal Mount. I think that they lived there from 1813 until William Wordsworth's death in 1850. It's such a beautiful house and really kind of inspired me to head to his poetry and to pick up a biography of Dorothy Wordsworth. This is by Frances Wilson, One podcast that I've got into an awful lot recently is a podcast called The Common Reader. It's by a guy called, I think it's a Henry Oliver, but basically it's just much more in-depth discussions on authors and novels that of kind of a part of kind of the classics. He had on Frances Wilson, and she mainly discussed her biographies of Muriel Spark, which I would love to read, and also D.H. Lawrence, The Burning Man, which I'm currently kind of just slowly making my way through. It was a fantastic episode and really fascinating to hear a kind of literary biographer talk about kind of the art of biography. I'm also listening to, and I'll pop it up on screen, Dorothy Wordsworth's Grasmere journals. I think this is narrated by Emma Fielding, and William Wordsworth's poetry is kind of also included in this narration. I'm having such a good time with this. I think in my May reading wrap up, I wrapped up Rural Hours by Harriet Baker. And one of the things from that is in the Virginia Woolf chapters, she discusses Virginia Woolf's Ascham journal, which Virginia Woolf actually modelled off Dorothy Wordsworth's Grasmere journals. So everything is kind of interconnected at the moment. I'm having a great time listening to the Grasmere journals, and I can't wait to kind of start this properly and really get to it. On the topic of journaling, two of the things that I have got recently are, I've spoken about this before, but my favourite notebooks are the Persephone Books notebooks because the quality of them is so high for really quite like a reasonable price. To mention these, I think it was in a bookish favourites video that I did back in February. I've been using these for years, but they recently were reprinting them, so they weren't available to buy. And finally they are, so I got one, and I've kind of gone back to this, which is my favourite notebook. I'm so happy to have my favourite notebook back in my life. For some reason, the quality of the paper and the book binding really does make a difference. Back in May, and it was mainly to help me with this channel, I decided to keep my Persephone book for like my own personal thoughts as a journal, and then also to start a Commonplace book. I've had this one since May, and the act of having a journal solely dedicated to what I'm reading has made such a difference to me in terms of collecting my thoughts. So a Commonplace book, I'm sure you guys know, is just a journal basically for the books that you're reading, whether it is for like ideas or quotes. I sometimes write down poems in here to make links between things that you're reading. I just love having a separate dedicated journal for these. I'm not too au fait with the history of commonplacing, but I think that this concept was started by the Victorians, which makes perfect sense. But yeah, I've really loved this. I use this literally every day as I'm reading, and just the very act of like writing things down helps me like join the dots in terms of across what I'm reading. I find it helps collect my thoughts, gather them, and make them more coherent, hopefully hopefully for these videos. But these two, I have between them the perfect little system. There's just an awful lot of crossover between readers and notebook lovers, so yeah, this is really working for me at the moment. That is my notebooks. What I also wanted to mention was when I was in the Lake District in Grasmere in May, I picked up this, which is the Penguin Classics English Romantic Verse, and my plan was to read a poem a night. What I tend to do of an evening is keep my phone, my iPad, laptops, like whatever it is, all downstairs, and upstairs between like 7 and 10 I just try and read. And now I always start that evening wind down with a poem from this collection. It has become a little bit of a ritual for me. What I've also been doing since kind of the middle of last year is reading a chapter from the Bible. I'm currently in the Gospels in John. That is going to take me like a really long time to get through, but a poem combined with a chapter is just a great way for me to start my like evening and I really love it. I'm really liking this collection as well, and I think that when I'm done with this, I really want to just kind of swap it for a different anthology. I do love my poetry, and I'm feeling like I'm getting back into the swing of things. I do have some poetry collections on my summer reading list that I also can't wait to get to, but it's the combination of a poem plus a Bible chapter that I just makes me feel like so content and so happy. So I cannot recommend that enough. I won't finish this, I think, until like autumn, beginning of winter, but I stuck with this and I'm absolutely loving it. I also just wanted to mention that I'm currently watching Kenneth Clarke's Civilizations, which is like an art, philosophy, history documentary from the end of the 60s. I don't know if anyone remembers, but a fair while ago now, they redid this series with Mary Beard, who I love, Simon Sharma, who I also love, and David Olusoga, and it missed the mark for me. I didn't really enjoy it, and I've been meaning ever since to go back and watch the original one. There are 13 episodes in this, and I think it goes from the fall of the Roman Empire right through to like Romanticism in the 18th century. I'm just about to start the third episode, which is the 13th century. I'm watching it on iPlayer, but all the episodes are on YouTube. The one thing I will say about this is that it is filmed in the 60s and there are occasional references that have not aged well. But that aside, I think in terms of substance, this is better, and I find it fascinating that this is better, more informative, has more depth than almost anything else being made today in the same vein. Right, that's it. I am going to go get myself a nice coffee, try and enjoy some early morning sun, and then I'm going to do some reading for the day. I hope that you're all having a lovely time whenever you're watching this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!